All right, so we'll continue here. Now that we have our Firebase Vision image and the options on that image, it's time for us to use the Firebase Vision Face Detector. So I'm going to say Firebase Vision Face Detector. The name says it all, right? I'm going to say Face Detector is equal to Firebase Vision. We're going to get an instance like that, and then we're going to get Vision Face Detector, and then we have to pass our options like that. Notice that there is indeed the get Vision Face Detector constructor here that is empty because it says because these are all optional, right? You can, if you want, you can pass options. If you don't want, you don't have to. There are default options, but we want to specify our options. That's why we created them up here. So now that we have our face detector here and we pass in our options, now it's time for us to use it. So I'm going to say face detector dot detect image. All right. To detect an image, I'm going to pass what? Our Firebase image, which we created there. It makes sense, doesn't it? Right? We create the actual image from what? From the bitmap, meaning the image we got from our device. And then we just pile on a lot of options, right? We have 3 here. Once we have those options, which are optional, as you saw here, and then I created a face detector instance, and I passed the options inside of this instance to say these are options I want to attach to our face detector. So as it detects, it knows the things to look for. Okay, and once I have that, then I invoke the face detector because now I have the detector which will be able to detect things. Well, to do that, we have to pass in an image. What image? Not just an image. It has to be a Fire Vision image that we created there. Okay, it makes sense. And so I'm going to say add, you've seen this before, Firebase on Success Listener, new on Success Listener, like that. I'm going to attach that on add failure, new on failure as well. And let's finalize there. All right, there we go. So now when we pass our Firebase Vision image, we receive a list of Vision Face, Firebase Vision Face types. We added this add on Success Listener. On Success, we have this list of Firebase Vision. So these are all the faces that will be coming in from the image. Meaning, if the image that we got only have one face, it's just going to be one. But if the image has more than one face, it's going to be faces. That's why it all comes as a list. Now we have all of the faces sitting there, but all these faces are not actually faces that we can see because everything now is in the format of the Firebase Vision face, which is just coordinates and numbers and streams and bits and all that stuff. But what we need to do now is actually to create a bitmap that can be mutated, that can be changed, so that we can then actually detect the faces. Right? Because at this point here, all of, like I said, all of it is just in a raw format. So what do we need to do? I'm going to create another bitmap type here. Call this mutable image. I'm going to create a bitmap from it. So I'm going to say bitmap that we're getting, copy, and I'm going to pass some configurations for our bitmap. So I'm going to bitmap.config. I'm going to get this arg88 there. And I'm going to, if it's mutable, I'm going to say true. So what we're saying here is that we are creating an actual bitmap that we are going to be able to use to actually start detecting faces inside. Think of it this way. At this point here, like I said, it's just gibberish, meaning it's just machine code and we can't really see anything. It's not an actual image. Okay, very good. What I'm doing here, we are actually taking a paper. Think of it in this case, a canvas, a paper, and we're laying out to say, okay, we're going to make this something really nice so that we can then later put the actual images with all the information that we want, like faces and left eyes and all that stuff. Does it make sense? So in this case here, once we have this mutable image, it's not really an image, but let's just call it an image. It's just a map of bits. That's why they call it bitmaps. Just a bunch of pixels that are already selected, already laid out for us to actually put something into it. But the cool thing is this bitmap here, this paper, it's something that is mutable because we want to be able to change it when we actually detect the faces. Does it make sense? All right, so at this point here, I'm going to create another method called detect faces. To detect those faces, we are going to, now this is a method we are going to create. We need to pass our Firebase faces, these guys here that are coming in raw. And of course, we have to pass the canvas where we want to overlay those faces. That's why I'm going to pass this mutable image. So if you think in terms of analogy as I'm explaining, you see that it's not that hard. It's not that difficult. So cool. All right, so next I'm going to go ahead and create this method here because we're here. I'm going to make it actually private down here. Very good. So you can see here, we're passing vision faces and mutable image. All right, so as good citizens always, we have to make an if statement here to make sure that our Firebase images list is not null. So in this case, it's null. I'm going to start there. Or bitmap, in this case, let's call this, let's change this to bitmap. Okay, same thing. I'm going to say bitmap is null. Oops. Go back like this. In this case, I'm going to just toast and I'm going to say there was an error. And I'm going to just return. All right, which means get out of here and then proceed. At this point here in detect faces method, once we understand that the Firebase vision faces that we are receiving, it's not null, and bitmap is also not null, right? The canvas in which we are going to put all the faces, then we are going to proceed. Now, to proceed here, remember this bitmap is a mutable bitmap, meaning it's just a canvas that can be changed according to whatever we want. Which means we can write to that canvas, right? Actually create, paint, and write things to that canvas. That's what we're going to be doing now. So here, I'm going to go ahead and say canvas. Remember canvas? All right, it's a class that allows us to write something on the screen. I'm going to say canvas is equal to new canvas. And of course, we have to pass the actual bitmap where we're going to be writing. Well, remember this guy here, bitmap? Yes. Very good. So now that we have our canvas, I'm going to create a paint, just a pencil really, call this face paint is equal to new paint. Very good. And I'm going to start creating this pencil here, face paint. I'm going to set the color. And at this point, I'm going to make color dot green. And then face paint dot set style. I'm going to say paint dot style. I want stroke. Very good. And face paint dot set stroke width. Now this has to be a float, so I'm going to say about 5 float, the width of the actual tip of our pen or pencil. And while I'm here, I'm going to create another paint, another pencil here, paint, face text paint, new paint, and face text here, that set color, so essentially the same thing. Color dot blue, face text paint dot set text size. I'm gonna go about 30 there, and face set typeface. I'm gonna just go and say typeface sans serif. You can use whatever you want, but that's fine. Okay, and then I'm going to create the actual landmark, meaning the landmark here, what are we talking about? Not the actual landmark outside, but is landmark on the face. So there are main features on our face. There is the nose, the eyes, the chin, the lips, and so forth, right? So I'm going to create another paint here, landmark. Paint is equal to new paint. Also send landmark paint, set color, color dot red, landmark paint dot set style, paint dot style. I want it to be fill. Good. And landmark again dot set stroke width, but at 8F. So now that we have our landmark paint, our face text paint, and our face paint, we can use it to start drawing. But before we do that, because at this point here, my friends, remember, we already have the faces and we have the canvas per se, the pixels bitmap where we can put those faces into. But what we want to also be able to do is to write on top of our faces, right? As you saw in the demo, so that we can have a triangle around the faces that are detected. And we can start pinpointing all the landmarks, like I said, the nose, the lips, the eyes, and the ears, and so forth. That's what we're doing here. Okay, but how do we do that? Well, in order for us to be able to do that, remember our Firebase faces here, Vision Faces, has all of the coordinates, all of the points that delimits our face or the faces that we're getting. Which means we have to loop through this list. This list has a lot of numbers, a lot of points, as I say. We have to loop through and detect all of those places, all of those features. Meaning we're going to loop through and find, for instance, the nose. And if there's a nose, we can, if we want, paint something on top of that nose. Probably first we're going to go and find all the faces, right? That makes sense. So find the faces and draw something around the faces. Then find the eyes and just draw something on the eyes, and find the upper lips, and so forth. All of that can be done because we have our Firebase Vision Faces. Okay, so here is where the magic happens. So I'm going to create a for loop. In this case here, I'm going to say int I is equal to 0. I is less than Firebase Visions.size, because it's just a list, an array list, I++. Very good. Inside here, I'm going to start drawing things according to our Firebase faces, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say canvas.draw. Canvas has all of these primitives that we can draw. So we can draw circle, line, text, and so forth. So in this case here, I'm going to draw a rectangle, right? And for rectangle, we have to pass a few things like left, float, like left, top, right, bottom, and the actual paint, the actual pencil that we created there. Notice our draw rectangle or draw rect here, constructor, it has different flavors, overloading constructors here. There's the first one that just requires a rect F, right, type, and the paint. The second one, rect R and paint. Regardless, you will always need a paint. And the last one, which requires actually the points that we want to draw this rectangle. But the beauty here, here's the beautiful part about all of this. The beauty here is that Firebase Vision Faces that we're getting, it already has that, meaning it always has the constructed bounds that will draw a rectangle or a square around faces. Think I'm lying? Check this out. I'm going to go ahead and say Firebase Visions. Look at this. I'm going to say .get pass I because I'm inside of a for loop. So I'm going to get each individual ones. And then I'm going to go ahead and say .get bounding box, which is a type of rect for rectangle. So they, Firebase folks, Firebase Vision folks, are actually helping us out in so many ways. So there we go. We have our rectangle. But again, we have to pass our paint. In this case, I'm going to pass our face paint, which is what we created at the top there. So it's going to be green. The stroke is going to be that style. The style is going to be stroke, and the width is going to be about 5. That's it. So now we went ahead and create that rectangle or square around the face. That's it. So for every face that we're going to go through finding, let's say if there is 2 faces, every face now that was found, it's going to go ahead and add that rectangle around them. That's it. Just like that. And on top of that, what we want to do, we also want to draw text. Remember that text that says face 0, face 1, and so forth? Well, I'm going to say canvas again, .draw text. Oh, beautiful. What text I want to draw? Well, I'm going to say face. In this case here, for each face, I'm going to go ahead and pass I because I want to say face 0, right? For each face, we'll have different probabilities, right? So I want to count that. And next, I'm going to go ahead and put all of the X and Y's, the bounds where this text is supposed to be. Because think of it, if we have a square, this imaginary square here, we want to say, I want the text to be at the top of this square. So we can do that. To do that, we can actually use our Firebase Visions again. I'm going to say Firebase Visions, .get, passing I, because we're still inside of this array. I'm going to go ahead and get bound box, and I'm going to go and get center X. So it gets the center of the entire screen. not the screen. In this case, it's just the center of our square, that is. And next, what I'm going to do, because I want this to be on top of our square, this face 0 or whatever, on top of our square, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just do a little bit of math here to move it up. So in this case here, I'm going to go actually subtract, say minus. Let's go to a new line here. I'm going to say minus. I'm going to also use Firebase Visions, that get again, because I'm just going to get all of those bounds and so forth. Dot get bounding box dot width, like that. And I'm going to divide that by 2. And I'm going to say plus about 8f. Okay, those are the calculations that I did before that tend to work for me. Right? And then for the x value, I'm going to do the same thing. We'll say Firebase dot get plus I dot get bounding box dot center y. In this case here, I'm going to add Firebase dot get I dot get bound box dot height, and I'm going to also divide by 2. In this case, I'm going to say minus 8f. So you can play around with this, and let's see. I don't need that, but I need to pass our paint, face paint, like that, and let's close. Very good. So you can play around with these numbers here depending on where you want the face text. But in this code here, what I'm doing, I'm just moving it up to top of our square that is going to be on top of the face. Okay, now we're having some problems here. So it turns out that if you divide by 2 integer division floating points context, you may end up having issues. So Android is telling us that we could fix things. I'm just going to go ahead and replace that with greater 2 angular bracket, 2 angular signs there. So like that. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. That just makes our editor here happy, and hopefully no errors will happen. So at this point here, we're able to go ahead and create the face square and also the text at the top for each faces that we find in our Firebase Vision faces from our image. If there's one face, no problem. We're going to show that face and that square around with the text at the top. If there's 20, for each face, we're going to add this face text as well as the square. All right, so I hope this is making sense. Good. I'll see you in the next video.